Mr. President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Yeah, Mr. President, I actually listened to the comments that were made by my good friend from Michigan. But I have to say this, that she's talking about what's considered by me and many others as arguably the most gifted jurist ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court. And I want to talk about that, but I've got something else to talk about first, because I think people know Judge Barrett by this time, but they may not know a couple of people that they should know about. Earlier this year, Arush Zarkeshan, or Zark, because of the complications of his name, it's called by most of his close friends, he was overjoyed. He had just graduated. That was just earlier this year, just graduated from the Tulsa Police Academy and was sworn in as a police officer. That was his life's ambition. Here's a guy who is so excited that he was taking that step. He was a shining example of everything you want in a new officer. He was bright, engaged, committed to public service. He wanted to give back and make his community a better place. I mean, that was him. At the end of June, only 6 weeks on patrol, he pulled over a car for a routine traffic stop. Now, as we all know, there's no such thing as a routine law enforcement process. And he and Sergeant Craig Johnson pulled over a car, and what happened next was horrifying and tragic. They were viciously shot in the head during that stop, despite many attempts to de-escalate the situation. Tragically, Sergeant Johnson succumbed to his injuries, while Zark remained in critical condition. Sergeant Johnson left behind his wife, Christy, and sons, Connor and Clinton. That's him here on the left, dashing, young, new. Yeah. In that moment of sorrow, Tulsa's community united in prayer and hope for the recovery of Zark. Now, since the shooting, Zark has undergone several surgeries. He spent months recovering in rehab. Throughout these months, Zark provided us with updates to his recovery and the progress he's been making. He even called into the class of new Tulsa Police Department recruits. He also went in person to his squad and met with them. His progress is truly remarkable, and as Tulsa Police Captain Kimberly Lee put it, he's a real example for all of us. And that's exactly right. Zark is a hero. He persevered through extraordinary pain and strife and is now making a speedy recovery. And last week, on October 15th, Zark returned home from 3 months of rehab and he was met by friends and family and supporters who welcomed him with open arms. Our mayor, G.T. Bynum, declared October 15th Officer Arush Zarkeshan Day in the city of Tulsa and proclaimed that Zark is Tulsa's hope, unquote. I couldn't agree more. Zark embodies everything that makes Oklahoma great. And I want to submit that proclamation, ask unanimous consent to be made part of the record at the conclusion of my remarks.
Without objection.
Zark wanted to give back to his community, and he delivered. October 15th will always hold a special place in the hearts of thousands of people that call Tulsa home. In August, I spoke on the Senate floor regarding the riots and anarchy happening around the country, but I was specifically referring to Portland, Oregon, and how these events and hateful rhetoric aimed at law enforcement have endangered countless of brave men and women who serve in law enforcement and certainly depressed them. They talk about things like peaceful protests, and yet in that case they were throwing bricks at officers. They sprayed officers, nearly blinding all three of them. And this was actually going on. And I highlight the contrast between the violence happening in Oregon with how we appreciate our officers in my state of Oklahoma. What a contrast. Oklahomans have great respect and admiration for our men and women in blue. We know that law enforcement are our neighbors, our friends, our family. They have a dangerous job, and they go beyond that job. I was talking to some of them the other day, and different ones gave different messages. You know, while they're on duty, defending rights, a lot of them, they teach young kids how to play baseball. They are just really great citizens. In the speech that I made in August, I highlighted the attack on Zark and Sergeant Johnson. These attacks are a painful reminder of the sacrifice that law enforcement make every day. Defunding the police rhetoric may be politically appealing to some on the left, but we must remember that law enforcement are the first in line of defense against threats like what we saw in Tulsa in June. I had the opportunity to talk to Zark this morning. He told me what was going through his mind while they were being rushed to the hospital. He said he was thinking, I hope our story reaches the nation. Well, your story, Zark, has reached the nation. It's reached the world right now. They know what happened. Zark wanted people to understand what police and law enforcement risk every day, a sacrifice too many take for granted. He wanted people to know the stories of good, honorable police officers. While his tragedy in Tulsa is a reminder of the threats our communities face, it is also a story of hope, Tulsa's hope. Jared Lindsay, who was the chairman of the Tulsa Fraternity Order of Police, said it best. He said, "There's not a lot of times you get to use the word miracle. Zark's recovery definitely fits that bill." And perhaps most telling and most inspiring, Zark doesn't lose sight of what was lost on June the 29th. On his return to Tulsa on a day that was proclaimed to recognize his heroism, he wore a shirt honoring Sergeant Johnson that said, "Fallen but not forgotten." Even this morning, he talked about Sergeant Johnson, Craig Johnson, and how he had wanted him to be returning to Tulsa with him as he did last week. Now that Zark is back in Tulsa, he's going to keep up his recovery, but can also enjoy a simple thing, these simple things that he's looking forward to: his own bed, his dogs, his Whataburger. He's already been there twice. And the love and support of all Tulsans. And while there are many challenges and hardship ahead for Tulsa and the nation, with this tragedy is a story of optimism and faith in our community and in our future. So I tell you, Mr. President, both Zark and Sergeant Johnson are American heroes, and they will and always will be American heroes. So we say, thanks, Zark. Thanks, Zark. You're great.